The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 15th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me a share of the property that will belong to me." So the father divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and when he began to be in need, so he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, and here I am dying of hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to the father, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' And the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Do all of you have something that you're saving for a special occasion? Or maybe you've had that something and you've been saving it, but then you finally brought it out to use or to eat or drink on that special occasion. So I was thinking about that. One thing came to mind for me, and it was this one bottle of wine that was left over from our wedding day. There's no special reason it was left over after our wedding. It was basically just the only thing that was left. At the end of the reception, it just got packed into a box and must have gotten lost in the shuffle. And it finally surfaced once we moved here. At which point we thought, we should save this for a special occasion. And so we put it up, and it sat there, and sat, and sat. We could never decide what that special occasion would be where we finally opened that bottle. Eventually we did share that bottle of wine from the wedding, but embarrassingly, neither Kim or I can remember what the occasion was. We kind of think we decided that instead of waiting for that special occasion to happen, we would make a special occasion in sharing this thing that we had been saving for so long. So do you have something like that, one of those things? Or maybe it's the fine china you have in your china cabinet that collects all the dust until you get it out that one time a year for the big family meal. But then maybe the day comes and the thought of getting it all out and washing it before and after the meal and then putting it back away for another year becomes so overwhelming you just use paper plates. I mean, what do these special things mean to you? And what makes us think that we need to hang on to them as often or for as long as we do? And what makes for a good special occasion? I was thinking about that and getting ready for today as I thought and witnessed this extravagant generosity that the father in today's parable showed to his son. Because there are a few things that we would have anticipated that this father was saving for some kind of special day that he appeared to have no problem just sharing on a whim. The first thing he shared was that inheritance of his younger son, the one whom we call the Prodigal Son. Normally, that special day where he would have received all this would have been when the father died. But instead, Jesus shocks us in this parable as we hear the son request the inheritance early before the father dies, which would have been an offensive slap in the face to the father. And yet, in another shock to the listener, the father grants the request. Now, you probably picked up on this much quicker than I did, but when I always heard about the father dividing the inheritance, for the longest time, for some reason, I just pictured this father, going to the bank or grabbing half of his savings and writing a check for half of it to the other son. It took me a while to realize that what would have happened is that the son was given half of the property, the farmland, the fields that were actively being used, which then the son went off and sold so that he could have money in his hands to go on his little adventure. And then, as we hear in yet another shock to Jesus' listeners, once the son had sold off half the family farm, once he went off into dissolute living and hit rock bottom, and then when he comes crawling back to the Father for any morsel of mercy and forgiveness, which he was not expecting to receive, what do we hear that the Father does? He orders all that stuff that was probably being saved for a special occasion, the robe, the ring, some sandals, even the fatted calf, be brought out in celebration of the one who has returned. And as Jesus is telling this parable, and he has all the scribes and Pharisees who he's directing this toward are hearing this, they're probably thinking that there is no way a father would act like that or treat his son, who had done all of those things to his father, treat his son in that way. Not a chance. And yeah, I'm sure that Jesus was trying to make a point about who God is through the actions of this father in this parable. And I'm sure in this parable, we too are called to follow in the footsteps of this father as an example of how to show mercy and offer forgiveness to those who treat us in ways we don't like. But we also know that Jesus is wise enough to be showing us something through each of the sons in this story as well. Because maybe you see yourself in the shoes of the younger son, the younger child. Maybe any of us have been in a place where we felt as though the world owed us more than our share, or that we wanted everything right in this instant. Maybe we too, at some point in our life, have gone off and spent all of our time and energy and resources on those things that we think will bring us joy and wholeness and happiness, only to realize how finite those things actually are. Maybe we've caught a glimpse of, or actually reached, the lowest of lows in our life, the place of deepest hunger, to the point that where there was nothing left to do for us except to reach up or reach out for help. Maybe, like that son, you've had the good fortune of being able to come to yourself and realize the kind of situation you've gotten yourself into. Realize that your trust has been in the wrong person. Realize that your trust was in you rather than in a wise and merciful Father. Maybe you also have longed for a welcome embrace, a tearful hug, or a homecoming to a place you belong. And maybe you've actually received it. There's always been so much that we can learn from and see ourselves in this youngest child. So much so that the parable's most often titled the parable of the Prodigal Son. And is that where we most often see ourselves? I mean, I know that I've seen and hit plenty of low points in my life and squandered away enough of it that I can picture myself in those shoes of that son. But I also know that I've been in the shoes of the older son, the prodigal son's brother, many times as well. Have you? I mean, I've seen the so-called blessings that have been heaped upon those who I've seen what they do and say behind closed doors. I too have muttered that familiar question of, why do good things happen to the bad people and the bad things happen to the good people? How long do I have to toil before I get even an ounce of recognition, while that other person can squander it all away, come crawling back, and have the party of the century thrown for them? And I worked for it. I earned this. And he gets all the reward. What's up with that? The younger sibling always gets whatever they want, don't they? Plus, the father never seems to come running after me. That's for sure. Doesn't matter that we're told that all of his is mine, and I've heard that promise before, many times before. What matters is that I've taken care of what I've been given. I've worked hard. I've honored those around me, but yet no one seems to be rejoicing over me. I bet there's times we've all been in those shoes too. And yes, it's hard to understand all of these things, why God chooses to love so unconditionally and forgive so generously. And it's hard to see others reap the rewards that you feel aren't owed to them. But in the end, what ultimately matters is that we have this God who rejoices over us, who celebrates over us no matter what. We have a God who waits for us to return when we decide to go off on our own. We have a God who showers us with mercy and forgiveness, love and welcome, and says that you are worthy of a special occasion. I feel like that's what we witnessed this morning in Brooklyn's baptism. She probably hasn't done a thing with as young as she is to earn God's love or squander it away. And still, God showers her with that forgiveness and new life, with that abundant love, and with this party for everything that is saved for a special occasion. I think that baptism, I think our life of faith, I think everything God does for us should always remind us that God's mercy is always shown to us. We are always welcomed home when we get lost. And God is always there to celebrate with us. Amen.